Continuing with some strategic and tactical considerations, here's a big one. In-house inventory management, are we going to do it ourselves as an organization, or are we going to work with a third-party logistics company? We said this in our very first module, that one of the drivers of globalization was outsourcing, and a big example of outsourcing was using third-party logistics companies, freight forwarders, warehousing companies, entities like that. This is a strategic consideration. Make or buy, as it's sometimes called. Another important one that sometimes companies overlook or simply don't put enough emphasis on, and that's systems integration. Here's that technology component again. Perhaps we have our own inventory management system, we as a multinational company. However, we use a third-party logistics company that they're going to have their own warehouse management system. How do we integrate the two so we create visibility, so we give people access to information, so we can track the whereabouts of cargo? Sometimes companies don't think about that integration. And then, because ultimately we don't want goods sitting in a warehouse, we want them dynamically moving across the supply chain, what about a transportation management system that integrates with inventory management, warehouse management, into the physical movement of goods? And then finally, accounting principles related to that value issue, valuation as we defined it as in our earlier definition. Is it based on a first in, first out basis? Is it a last in, first out? The values that we place on inventories, is it based on the cost of that inventory or its market value? Meaning that if goods are sitting around for so long, they lose market value and might even be below our cost. These are accounting principles that have to be part of that overall strategic approach. A couple more, and we're almost done with this module. Some best practices for managing, handling our inventory. Talked about this a little earlier when we looked at our item cards, our item records, you'll recall. ABC analysis. How do we prioritize inventory based on value and usage so that we're accounting for that inventory in time periods that are a reflection of its value and its use? We'll talk a lot more about that later, but that's basically what ABC analysis is. And then cycle counting. Constantly counting every single piece in our warehouse or distribution network to make sure that what the system says we have matches with what we physically have. Safety stock levels, we talked about that. Order points as well. When our stock of finished goods, for example, gets down to a certain level, we have to reorder. What is that order point? We have some good techniques and calculations for doing that. What are our min-max levels? We haven't introduced this term. Again, we'll do that in the inventory management module, but it's basically a tool that allows us to minimize our investment in inventory without losing out on sales opportunities, which is to say that we can only reorder a product when it gets down to a certain minimum level, and when we do reorder, it can't go beyond a maximum level, min-max. We'll give a good treatment of that in the inventory management module. And then title transfer, meaning when we acquire goods and take it into our inventory, when do we become the owners of that? That has very real accounting implications as well as risk management implications. And when we sell goods overseas, when does title transfer? Because that's when inventory leaves our balance sheet where inventories are found and is converted into a sale on our income statement. So you have to think about title transfer on both the buy side and the sell side. Regardless of the model or type of inventory, these are some related costs to consider. The ordering costs themselves. Now, we will say that ordering costs have gone down considerably with the advent of trade facilitating software, but you still have to have people employed on the ordering side of the business in a clerical and administrative support functions. So you need to know what they are and who they are and how much they cost. Carrying costs, which are defined as specific expenses related to the acquisition and management of inventory. Cost of capital, especially if we have to go out and borrow money short term to fund the purchase of inventory, the cost of that capital becomes a part of the overall expense. Opportunity cost, a little bit harder to measure, but opportunity cost is an economics principle in this particular environment that says you can't spend the same dollar on more than one thing. So if we're investing money in inventory, that's $1 less we can put in new product research and development or training for our sales force. So for every dollar we spend in inventory, that's $1 we can't invest somewhere else. Or turn it into dividends, for example, to pay back our shareholders or to reward our shareholders. Lease expense for buildings, payroll related to warehousing and distribution, all of those systems cost. Software is great, but it costs money. Materials handling, equipment, things from forklifts to dock levelers, anything to do with handling equipment, conveyor belts, etc., maintenance of that equipment, and supplies to keep everything working. Transportation in our satellite distribution network could be ocean freight, air freight, surface, rail or truck. Don't forget about returns and reverse logistics as a cost to consider. Risk management, a whole discipline in and of itself. The cost of theft, pilferage, damage to goods. What are our insurance premiums? How much money do we have to pay for security to keep an eye on all of this stuff? And then, last one, hard to measure, but stock out costs. Lost sales, that's a cost of inventory. We always want to minimize our investment in inventory, but not to the point where we don't have product to sell. That's the balancing act that we've talked about so much. If we have a stock out cost and we have to expedite transportation, deliver goods from Hong Kong via air freight as opposed to ocean to meet a big customer order, that's an expense associated with inventory management. Back orders that need to be processed over and over again. Those lost sales, sometimes that we know about and sometimes that we don't know about. And the hardest one to measure, but maybe the most important, is the depletion of customer goodwill. How many times will a customer try to place an order with us if every time they do, we can't complete the order or sell them anything? That's customer goodwill. One day they will go away and probably not even say anything about it. That's an expense. So all of those things bring us to the end of Module 3. So sales and operations planning, good treatment of that subject, buy side, sell side, and then an intro into inventory management, which we will elaborate upon a great deal moving forward. So congratulations for completing Module 3, and let's move on to Module 4.